1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to episode 7 of the Immigrants and Exiles podcast, a conversation recorded at the Beachcomber Cafe in St Kilda between me, Moreno, and my friend Walter. In this episode, we discuss Australia's shallow political culture and the complicity of migrants in promulgating terra nullius. All right, Walter, you have this idea about Australia being a penal colony, and in my book I'm calling it the English colony, and I'll tell you where the English colony idea came from. My uncle Paolo in Italy, this is my mother's brother, who died a few months ago. I often talked politics with him. Italian politics, Australian politics, American politics. He was an old-fashioned Italian communist, so in the 60s and 70s I remember he was very pro-Soviet Union. And so was my grandfather, his father. But he always used to tell me that Australia was an English colony.
Yeah, which it was, and probably still is. John Howard told us that was really the kind of era we should look back to, the 1950s, when we were very British, English. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted.
He was a great Robert Menzies fan too. Yeah. I mean, I tried to explain to him the way that Australian politics worked with the Queen, the Governor, and that, and he'd say, no, look, the Queen of England sacked your government. Right? He was talking about the Whitlam government in 1975. And I'd say, yeah, but, that's the way the system works in Australia. And he'd say, no, that's rubbish. You were an English colony, you still are an English colony, and what he meant by English really was British. But both he and everyone else in the village in San Ginese used to say Inglese and Inglesi. That was their way of saying British.
Yeah, and maybe... Okay. But maybe they were right in an unconscious way, because if you talk to the Irish, and we know this now from the independence movements that haven't quite succeeded, even in Northern Ireland, and the Scottish, and you ask the Welsh, that's who they feel like. They don't feel like they're English, and they're only British out of a political enforcement that exists.
Yeah. But my uncle and the Italians that I knew, they use the word English.
Yeah.
Okay, so in my book I'm calling it the English colony. I hardly mention the word Australia. It's the English colony. So that was it. Then you're interested, and as you can see, I mean, we're letting the family history go a little for the time being. We're moving on to other issues, but we will come back to the family history, won't we, Walter?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Valtere. Yeah. Cultural identities. You want to talk about cultural identities? Tell me about that. Go on.
Yeah, but I'd like to get to that, but I'd just like to say that there's going back to the English colony.
Oh yeah.
And what?
And the penal colony idea. Yeah. Go on.
And what your uncle meant. It's connected intimately to my idea of the penal colony when I explain to people who come here and they complain about aspects of Australian culture and attitudes and the way the law works or doesn't work, and why politicians speak in such a supremely condescending way about refugees or migrants. Yeah. And people like that have to earn their stripes to come to Australia. They owe Australia.
Yes.
When we know that migrants actually contribute to the creation of a country like they're the lifeblood of a country like Australia. Anyway, it's to me that penal colony is how I explain that Australia is a society made up of crimes and punishment, like Dostoevsky's story. Yeah. If you refuse to obey every little law and regulation, from speeding cameras to voting or not voting, you're going to be punished in some way. It may only be a fine, or the police are going to march at the gay Mardi Gras, and then they're upset because the organisers don't want them to march because there's a lot of behind-the-scenes mistreatment still of gay people by the police, and so this penal colony exists to keep people under control. It's not a flourishing democracy where creative tensions and political freedoms exist. We have Big Brother here, not just on TV. We have it actually everywhere, even without the CCTV that they've got in the UK. So that's the connection I feel that there is. There is the super culture,
Yes.
which is the Anglo one, and then there are all the minority cultures which have to make their way up, like Dante travelling through hell, and we're crawling up along
Yes.
the body of the devil to try and make our way to, to the celestial openings to heaven.
You said something a minute ago,
Yeah.
and I can't remember exactly now how I'm going to introduce this, but it made me think of a French waitress who was working here at the Beachcomber Cafe,
Oh yeah.
who talked about, she was going back, and then unless I've got this completely wrong, I think she was going to travel to other places and then go back to France. But she said about Australia that she had been here a while on her working holiday and it was okay, but she felt that she hadn't actually got to know anybody or what they really were on about. They had superficially, I think she felt everything was good and everybody told you everything was good, but she never really found out what was really going on in the place. Can you remember this, or am I just making it up?
I think it was that tall brunette.
Oh, you
probably
remember?
Roughly the last of the French girls that were
Yes,
here working.
she was one of the later ones.
Yeah,
yes.
she was an intelligent girl.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good point.
Can you
that she
remember
made.
anything about that?
Yeah, I remember at the time thinking that what she was saying reminded me of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World.
Yeah.
Where people take soma to keep themselves, or to be kept calm, and happy.
Yeah.
So I feel like Australia is a country where you have to avoid controversy.
Yes.
You can't have the sorts of discussions or even debates that we have here,
Yeah.
or have in some other circles, within family or among other people,
Yeah.
because they become arguments.
Yes.
But not because there's a controversy really, but because people are afraid of disrupting the well-being of the environment. And I think, but life is full of tensions. There's life and death.
The idea that you'd never talk about politics or religion,
No.
right, in
Yes,
civil society,
that's right.
where does that come from? Is that an Australian thing, or do the Americans do that, and the British and the Italians also?
I don't remember this kind of thing in Italy.
We used to talk politics in Italy all the time.
Yes.
Religion, the Catholic Church, the communists,
Absolutely.
the Christian Democrats, and
Yeah. When I was studying in Pisa, my father was having a heated argument because la direttrice, the lady who ran the college that I was in, her father was a socialist. And
Yes.
he had complained to her when he entered Parliament about how the fascists had beaten him up because he was protesting against the exclusivity of the fascist party as the one party rule. And my father was saying how that was right because Italians were chaotic and they needed order in their lives, and that's what was. And he couldn't accept that her father was simply a socialist and didn't agree.
yes.
And he was getting hot under the collar, and she was getting hot under the collar.
Yeah.
But it wasn't threatening, you know.
No. I know. Politics and religion.
Yeah.
Australians do not talk about it.
And it makes us not know each other. And that's why you don't get to know your neighbours really well.
Oh, that's true.
That's what I think anyway.
Yeah.
I'm extrapolating a little bit.
Yeah,
I think it's a
fair enough.
reasonable extrapolation.
Yep, okay.
Anyway, you asked me about cultural identities.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that a lot of people have left their countries of origin out of a sense of resentment for what took place in the war and the collapse of economies after the war through the 1950s, resenting their impoverished socio-economic conditions.
I had a communist uncle on the other side of the family. All my uncles are communist. There's one left alive. And he actually, the way he saw the migration phenomenon in Italy was that the nation had failed its people. It had failed its people by not providing them with a living. You know, housing, work, all that kind of thing. And that people were therefore forced to leave, and this was a failing of the nation, that, you know, it had failed to do that to its people.
Well, I think it's a good point that your uncle made, because fascism, despite what some people like my father would think, actually failed to bring people together. The old empires of Britain and France had lost their power base, right? They were failing. Belgium, the Dutch already were being kicked out of the Pacific and out of Africa, and Mussolini wanted to still go along and recreate that empire for Italy. So when they lost the war, they had nothing. It was just they had been papering over the cracks of the Great Depression. So I think a lot of people resented the failures of the old Italian state under fascism, and they divested themselves. So like resentment and divestment go together. They leave Italy and they come to investment. They come to invest in Australia, looking for the hope of being productive. And
you know what, just on that point, I've often thought that what they were told, what the migrants were told, even implicitly, if not explicitly, some of it was explicit, was here is a land where everything is open to you. It's basically the migrant terra nullius, okay? Go there, work there, buy yourself a property, buy something, work, enjoy. Everything is open and free to you. The place has been unused, unexploited for centuries, millennia. Okay, go in there and take advantage of it. My parents were certainly never told that they were going to a place where people had lived for tens of thousands of years and had managed the land and lived their life. They were certainly not told that. They were told, go there and exploit it any way you can.
Yeah, which is what we still do.
Well, we do that, but certainly in the 50s, with all these migrants coming in, they were told, they were given free rein to do whatever they had to earn a living. In fact, this led to my dad at one stage telling me he felt that the indigenous people of Australia were, we probably already mentioned it, a finished race.
Una razza finita.
Una razza finita. What an expression.
Right.
It's powerful, isn't it?
It is.
It's more powerful than
extermination.
Italian. Oh, God. Una razza finita. And he was absolutely wrong. But he wasn't the only person thinking that. He was telling me this in the 70s. And he wasn't the only migrant who believed that. There are a lot of English people here who believe that too. Go on, keep going. I interrupted you.
Even by the absence of any discussion, even in formal educational courses.
Yeah.
Like I studied Australian history for 1 year.
Yeah.
And the component part of the Aborigines had simply to do with the dream time.
That's it.
And I thought, they belong to the 19th century or earlier. I didn't realise that they'd been around for 60,000 plus years.
Yes.
Or that there were Aborigines until I came to St Kilda with my parents one time. And there were groups of Aborigines sitting at the end of Fitzroy Street.
Yeah.
Most of the time drinking.
Yeah.
I thought, that's why we don't know about them, because they are people who misbehave.
Yes. Yes. And we had no idea what was going on. And but the migrants were complicit. That's what I've thought ever since then, that all those migrants, the post-war intake, were all complicit.
And yet life punishes you in a way, because there's karma, because after they divest themselves of Italy or Greece or Germany or wherever they've come from, and they have their dreams, which is a form of reinvestment, like I was saying, a new resentment takes place, which is the realisation that even if they did buy a home and perhaps through negative gearing they got a few other houses to earn an income from, they find the emptiness of it, and there's still prejudice against them anyway, racism.